Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Jeffries, you talked about modernization. We go back to that. Obviously, it's a theme that we're hearing over and over again in this hearing. And you said the regulations were mostly designed in the 1970s. Is that correct?
At least in some cases, if not before and since. But we're a legacy industry with legacy regulations.
Gotcha. So we haven't really done much in Congress in that period of time?
I think Congress has done and has tried to do a lot of things. A lot of it's been around funding. The challenge is, I think you often try to regulate for the current condition. And so, for example, I talked about autonomous track inspection. That's today's technology. But I would be hesitant to say, oh, let's say that you have to use ATI to do track inspections because that locks you into today's practice. So that's why we're focused on outcomes-based, not inputs-based. Where do we want to go? And let's continue to evolve how we can best get there.
Gotcha. It seems like we may be overdue for some regulatory changes since the 70s was a decent period of time ago. You talked about the Highway Trust Fund. Just come for the record for the people watching, how does that interplay with rail service?
Sure. So our biggest partner, also our biggest competitor, is the commercial trucking industry. And we've actually worked closer together than we ever did, but we're also highly competitive in certain markets. And so, as you've heard me say, we're very proud of the fact that we invest almost entirely on our own dime back into our network, where truckers operate over infrastructure paid for by the Highway Trust Fund. And that's all well and good when those fees cover the cost of the highways themselves. But what we've seen is more and more shortfalls, so that general fund transfers are required to fund the highway network. And when that happens, that's a subsidy to what our competitors are paying into the infrastructure they operate. And so all we're looking for is a competitive playing field where each side puts in the appropriate amount of cash over the infrastructure that it operates.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So for example, if the Highway Trust Fund were to run out of money, which it seems like that's something we've been talking about for a long time, that's problematic, obviously, right? Understatement.
Absolutely.
Right. So if you have vehicles on the road that are not paying gas tax at all, that's a problem.
Yes.
Right? So if you were to create legislation or federal policy that bans internal combustion engine cars, would that increase the Federal Highway Trust Fund or decrease it?
I think that would be problematic, to say the
That
least.
would be problematic. Well, the previous administration wanted to ban ICE cars as of 2035. Fortunately, we were able to get rid of that through a Congressional Review Act a couple weeks ago. Huge deal. We no longer have EV mandates. Would it make sense, though, if we could raise money into the fund to say, hey, we're going to charge maybe a $500 one-time fee for battery electric vehicles since they're paying zero gas tax? Would that be not only good for the industry, but just fair for people who are paying a gas tax versus people who aren't?
I think whether it's autos or trucks or any other form of transportation using the highways, we think it's appropriate that they pay for the infrastructure wear and tear they cause.
Gotcha. Well, I'm hoping that in the big, beautiful bill, we can put in a $500 one-time fee for battery electric vehicles, $250 for hybrids. It will raise over $12 billion over the budget window and start addressing some of that shortfall. So I urge my colleagues to consider making that happen. If I could switch to you, Mr. Gilbertson, in your mind, what's holding back innovation in your industry? Like, what's the main impediment to innovation?
Senator, it's a good question. I'm not sure there's a clear answer. I mean, there's a financial component to it. There is a regulatory component to it, and there is innovation occurring. As I mentioned, it's powerful. It not only improves safety, it improves our offering to our customer, and we absolutely need to do it. When you know the delivery minute of your pizza, but we can't tell you the delivery day of a rail car, we have a problem.
Very aware. When I was in the retail automotive business, we would, of course, always be delayed by the cars that were sold, and the cars that we didn't want arrived immediately and on time. So, question for you, Mr. Cumber. I want to emphasize there's clearly a difference between freight, and the government doesn't own any freight trains, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Gotcha. Okay, because thank God we'd lose hundreds of billions of dollars there. But we do own or are responsible to fund Amtrak, correct?
Correct.
So I grew up in South Florida, so you don't have to ask me to visit, although this time of year it's insanely hot, even by DC standards. But if I were to go from Miami to Orlando, I have two choices for rail. I can go on Amtrak or go on Brightline. What's the average speed that you travel between Miami and Orlando?
Our trains go about 110 miles an hour.
And what's the average speed of Amtrak?
I believe it's somewhere in the 40 to 50 mile per hour.
Gotcha. So you can get to Miami, Orlando in about 3 hours with Brightline, 7.5 hours on Amtrak.
And if I could add one more thing to that, I believe Amtrak runs twice a day. We run 36 trains, one-way trains between Miami and Orlando. So the frequency is a big difference too.
Gotcha. I know of over time, so I'm going to cut to the chase of my line of questioning. But you look at the stations, the modern cabin. I'm not trying to do a commercial for Brightline, but it is night and day. It reminds me of a Russian car from the 70s versus a modern vehicle today. Why are we even in this business? Why are we subsidizing or owning passenger rail in America when we're terrible at it? The government is objectively really, really bad at running that. If we had government airlines, holy Lord, can you imagine what that would look like? Why don't we just get out of that business completely, let the private sector run it? Is that something that I'd ask all four of you just to quickly comment? Does that seem like a reasonable approach to just say, we've given it the freshman try, like I don't know, 60, 70, 80 years. It's not worked. We've lost hundreds of billions of dollars and objectively provide terrible service. Going 40 miles an hour from Miami to Orlando is insane. No, nobody wants to answer that question.
Well, Senator, I'll just say I'm from South Florida, too. I'm from Belglade, Palm Beach County, Florida, and I've ridden Brightline. I think a public-private partnership, local leaders are not opposed to that. They just want partners. And I would be very open to our members considering that.
I would just add that, it probably depends on the situation, right? Because what the motivation is. Is it a public service or is it a private enterprise? And in certain parts of the country where Mr. Hussein's operating, for example, and I bet he wants to expand to other areas, there's lots of opportunity for private enterprise to thrive. Congress has made the decision that it also wants to provide other services that are going to be inherently money losing. And as long as that's the point of view, then that service needs to be provided as well. So it's probably not a either or, it's probably a situational situation.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is that providing air travel is also a public service, but there's no government-owned airline for good reason. So, Chairman, I'm over my time, but thank you for giving me the opportunity.